Hi friends, it's Theresa with Garden Party Flower Farm and Open Food Network Canada. When I was putting this together today, I was going through my phone for images and came across this one this is a load for a particular design shop in town here locally where I am, just outside of Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. And it made me feel so much like spring. We're in the middle of a snowstorm. Um, We're going to talk today about prices for florists and designers when you're selling in those kind of wholesale chains. This is a retake of a discussion we had with 7 flower hubs across Canada about pricing and quality issues. And I'm going to do my best to summarize the comments from those hubs for you here today, if I can. And just to note that this work is part of ongoing work that is sponsored by both Open Food Network Canada and Agriculture Agri-Food Canada. And thanks so much to them for their support. So you may have already seen, because it was the subject of a previous post, this downloadable price list. And I'm going to urge you to go download this. And it comes with a bit of there's a YouTube video about it, but there's also a blog that talks about how to use with this price list, where they come from. It's important you understand it before you just dive in and take an average price of something. There's a lot of context to understand here. And in that first part 1 YouTube video, I go through how you might use this for retail sales. So a subscription program or a pick your own or something like that. But today we're going to talk a little bit differently about how to use these prices with wholesale situations. So again, a quick reminder, where do these prices come from? These are pooled across 7 online marketplaces. You'll hear me say hub, and that's what I mean. But basically, it's like an online farmers market for flowers. And there are 7 different ones in Canada at the moment. They span large and small towns, different sized farms. The prices are only from the 2024 season. And I'm going to talk through some of the caveats about these prices as we proceed. These are the 7 hubs. So 5 are in Ontario and 2 are in Alberta. So you can see they're quite a range of different sized cities and different sized demographics. Now, this is the page for Open Flower Network, and I just wanted to show you where that price list is. If you go here and scroll down under Resources for Flower Farmers, it's this one, Cut Flower Pricing, right here. And so if you click on that, it'll take you to a little blog post, a YouTube video, and a link where you can download either as a Google Sheet or an Excel file the price list. And you'll want to do that because then you can sort it however you want. Okay, when we got together as a group of flower marketplaces, and I'm going to say we, because I used to sell in 2 different online marketplaces, because I'm kind of retiring and I'm scaling back a little bit, I still do sell to designers and florists, but only on my own, if you will, in local community. So I don't participate regularly in any of the hubs right now, but I feel like I'm part of them because I was for a long time. I have a very fond place for all of them in my heart. So one of the first things we do is we look through that price list. What stems sell for the most? And I did that. And if you do that, you'll see it's artichoke flower. Now, of course, the caveat is if you further look at that price list, you'll see across that row that yes, but not very many stems of artichoke sold. So in other words, if you think you're going to make your riches selling artichokes, I hope you have a market lined up. It's probably not the best of strategies. But on the other hand, if you ask the question, what flowers were most popular in a sense, or what sold the most across Canada in 2024, these are at the top. There might not be a surprise about dahlias, but they're surprising about some of the other things there perhaps. And so we have, as a group of hubs, then talking about this to kind of say, well, what does all this mean? One of the things is we were surprised, excuse me, by a few things. Sorry. One of the things was peonies surprised us because we thought there would be more than that sold. Um, Remember, this is 2024, and remember, 5 of those hubs are Ontario. And in Ontario last June, remember how things heated up really fast. With perennials, when it heats up really fast, it's like it gives that flower a boost. And even if you hold it in a cooler, as soon as you take it out of the cooler, it's got that pent up energy from the early spring heat, and it just zooms open. So we couldn't sell peonies before they spent their blooms, basically. So I think that's what accounted for the lower peony sales last year. Zinnias was a surprise. It was a surprise for me. I spent a lot of time looking for exotic flowers, and here a very common flower is the second highest in sales. And the thing is, it might be here that both farmers and designers are discovering zinnias again, especially because there's so much zinnia breeding going on, and there's all these new pastel varieties coming into play. And it could be that this is a good thing for flower farmers in Canada, because across the country we can all grow zinnias fairly easily. I was also surprised that there weren't more perennials sold, and that's because I kind of specialize in selling perennials. Um, and there weren't very many sold. The prices were good, but there weren't very many in quantity. And I think this is a supply issue. Uh, it could be that there's a lot of newer farms supplying these marketplaces, and they probably have planted perennials, but it's maybe going to take a couple of years for those perennials to really come into full production, and we're not quite there yet. So it could be that over time we start to see more and more perennials selling in these hubs. And the ranunculus and lisianthus I listed here because the ranges jumped out at us. You see, for on this price list, if you haven't looked, you always get the range, what was the lowest price and what was the highest price. And I'm going to talk more about ranges because that's where the issues of quantity especially lie. So you can see some products have very large ranges. And, so what's up with that? I want to dissuade you from assuming that the lower part of this range is a poor quality issue. I know you're going to want to think that. You're going to want to think, oh, it's a big range. It's because quality varies. I would say in these hubs, quality does not vary like that. That is not what is accounting for the range in prices. The quality of all stems is high. This 60-cent dahlia is a high quality stem. It is not a secondary quality. It's not a second. There are no seconds in all of this data. The reason for this range is probably something different. First of all, look at the average. That's much closer to the bottom than the top end of the range. It tells you that this top price might be an outlier. We don't know the exact situation. It could be one farm, it could be one time, it could have been a mistake, it could have been lots of things. But that range tells you that if dahlias sold for $12.80 a stem, it wasn't very many of them before you get real excited. I'm really not trying to rain on your parade. I'm just trying to put this into context. Why would something sell for 60 cents though? That seems awfully low. It does seem low, but think about it. Peak of the season, everybody's got orange shades of dahlias, and there's a farmer with thousands of dahlias in the marketplace, and they're selling them not by the stem, not by the bunch, but by the whole bucket. They're selling them, a bucket of 50 maybe. And so in that bucket of 50 orange dahlias that everybody has, that price is going to fall because of the quantity and because of the variety. So that's what's driving things down to the lower part of the range. Foliage branches, I think you dismiss because this is a this is a pot of all kinds of different things. Obviously, an 18-cent branch is different from a $12 branch. It's a different product. So I don't think you can get a lot of guidance on foliage branches from here, except to say the average price is $152, which seems about right. Foxtail lilies, same thing as the dahlias here. This is probably peak season and somebody's got a whole bucket of them to sell, and the quantity drove the price down. So it's the quantity and variety driving price down, not quality here. Same for ranunculus. Now, I want to highlight foxgloves, and snapdragons would be another example in here, maybe campanula too. This is a interesting situation because here we're talking about a line flower which normally would capture quite a high price, $4.40, as you see, but we often sell second or even third cuts as well. So I want you to think of a second cut or a third cut foxglove or snapdragon or campanula as actually a different product altogether than the first cut. Because a first cut foxglove, you're talking tall, you're talking hefty stem. It's also much easier to keep a first cut in bud. The second and third cuts, bloom and seed really, really fast. So I think what we're seeing in the lower end here is more about when the harvest has happened and whether it's multiple or single harvest flower. And with Lisianthus, a similar thing. I think this range is about pinching. So it's more about a cultivation practice. Did you pinch or didn't you pinch? Because a $4 stem, you can imagine, is a branched stem of Lisianthus, probably a variety that's hard to find for the buyer. Maybe 5 or even 6 blooms open or ready to open on that branch, maybe even sold by the stem and not in a bunch. Because if you've ever tried to bunch 10 stems of unpinched Lisianthus, you know that it's not really possible. It's this big bunch like this. So that's a different product from a Lisianthus that's been pinched. And the dollar one, you might have the impact of pinching and quantity sales here. So when would a Lisianthus sell for $1? Well, let's say you've pinched and you're towards the end of the harvest. So they don't have much longer to last. You've got to get them out. You've got a lot of them. You're selling them in bulk by the bucket, maybe 50 stems in a bucket, and you've got a single bloom on every stem. So you've got 50 blooms in the whole bucket. Those might sell for $1 a stem. So you need to think about those kinds of things with pinching and cutting of multiple cuts. Is the flower the same as the first cut? It's probably not. Is a pinched flower the same as an unpinched flower? It's probably not. Think of them like they're different products, really. We also talked a lot about, for each of these hubs, remember I'm showing you average prices, averaged across all the hubs. Well, of course, each hub is interested in their own prices and where they sit in relation to that average. So hubs that are farther away from major flower distribution points, and I'm going to say Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, perhaps, where flowers in the wholesale chain have to be driven further to get to designers in those areas, incurring freight along the way. Those hubs have higher prices than the average prices in this list. And that sort of rang true to those particular hubs. Other end of the scale, hubs that are located just outside of the GTA. Millgrove would be an example. This is where I am. And when I ran a hub here in Kitchener-Waterloo, this was the case. They're a bit lower than what that average price is that you see. Why would that be? Because in my community, I'm an hour from Flower Circle. So 1 hour down the highway is every flower a designer could ever want, right? It's the candy store flowers. And the trucks come from there to here really quickly, multiple runs every week. So flowers are readily available that are chain wholesale flowers. Commercial flowers are readily available. So I have to really watch those prices with those distributors because it doesn't make sense for me to try to charge very much above them. I can go a little bit above them, but I can't go a lot above them. And then why is the GTA on average? Well, because interestingly in the GTA, you have both upward and downward effects on prices. You have this downward effect because the GTA is right in the middle of the flower candy store and can get absolutely anything they want there. So that, and relatively inexpensively sometimes. So that puts a downward pressure. But at the same time, you've got this massive group of buyers and ultimate customers who have the events, the weddings, and so forth. A huge assortment of them. Some of them higher scale. So you have more higher scaled events and sales points for those designers to use. And so that puts a bit of an upward pressure on the price there. So you've got all those pressures going on at the same time, but it is to say your community might be above or below those average prices. And the only way you can know is by checking with other wholesale product in your community. And you have to do that. If it means you have to buy the list, but you have to do that. There's a widespread agreement among buyers and sellers in these hubs that there are advantages to the local product, that the quality is much higher over the wholesale price. So you're worth more, absolutely. The question is how much more? And that's where, pricing is a bit of an art, not just numbers. A caveat here, these prices don't include pre-orders. Pre-ordered prices could be a little different. In some cases, they could be higher. For example, if a designer calls and wants to book, 20 bunches of Roseanne terracottas or something for a certain date, I would consider that a custom order depending on the date, because I'm going to have to hold them. I'm going to have to stage my harvest and watch it really closely, get them into a cooler at the right time. And that's always more of a risk for me. It's always a risk to hold flowers. So I probably am asking a premium for that. Same as if I've got a pre-order and it's for buckets in a particular palette, that's a premium for me because I've got to do the thinking about the palette and so forth. So a pre-order like that, the price per stem would be a little higher. On the other hand, with a pre-order, the price per stem could be lower. For example, same designer who orders the Lisianthus says, oh, and I'd also like to pick up 6 bunches of white and off-white cosmos. Middle of August, cosmos, 300 feet of them, I'm going to be trying to get rid of them. So I'm going to offer a bulk price on those cosmos to her. And that's a pre-order where I'm going to lower the price. So really important to understand that pre-orders are not included in these numbers, and they could drive prices up or down depending. The other last caveat, and I talked about this in the first episode, these are not the prices the farmer gets. And so when you look at that price and you go, $1.40 for a zinnia, I'm going to get more than that. Okay, but bear in mind that on average across Canada, that is not what farmers got. They got less than that. And the reason for that is the hub itself, the marketplace, is a middleman of sorts, right? It's a very different situation if you're driving directly to the designer and you've got them in your car and you're selling them. In a hub situation, the hub is offering services of some sort for you. Everything from invoicing to the hub is taking the risk that someone doesn't pay. So that you're paying a fee for all of that. In my estimation, it was far better to pay that fee than to do all that servicing myself. But just to know, these are not necessarily the prices the farmer gets. One of the things that came to us as a bit of an aha in our discussions is, why do we call these wholesale markets? It's a very good point. And I've been calling them wholesale markets too, and I stand corrected. They're not wholesale markets. They're business to business markets. Yes, we have a business, a farm, selling to a business, a designer or florist. But generally, we're selling in very diverse quantities in these markets. So we have farmers who are selling by the bunch, and we have buyers who are buying by the bunch, and we have farmers who are selling in quantity by the bucket, and we have buyers who are buying in quantity by the bucket. So really, these aren't always wholesale quantities. Now, hubs say they are being asked by designers to try to make sure that bulk is available. That's how they're used to buying from distributors now. And if we want to grow and strengthen our whole sector, we have to be able to do that. We have to be able to offer larger quantities because there's a demand for that. So I think over time, we might see marketplaces change a little bit to clarify a by the bunch price versus a by the bucket price, and there'll be different prices. So I think that's important to think through. And I'm going to come back to it in a minute. But first, another aha for us was that what does a bucket even mean? Because a bucket is not a bucket is not a bucket. For example, meadow bits, which is a common bucket sold in these markets, which is basically a grabbing of meadow-like flowers and grasses, various stems, not specifying the varieties, filler kinds of flowers, and usually a lot of them. They're not necessarily all cleaned, and some have flowers that are falling off, some have seed pods already, etc. And so these meadow bits probably sell for a low stem price, 50 cents or lower. So let's imagine you grabbed a Cosmos stem for your meadow bits bucket. That stem is going to be a 50-cent stem of Cosmos, a 70 or 80-cent stem of Cosmos at best. So that's why that Cosmos lower end of the range might look low. Maybe that stem was in a meadow bits bucket. Compare that to a designer bucket. So this is like my pre-ordered example in a way. It's designed ready, it's palette specific. And when I say design ready, what that means is they're all cleaned. The seed pods are all picked off. Those flowers are ready for a designer to take to the installation and use them. In other words, that designer doesn't have to pay somebody else to do that. So this is a higher price because I've already embedded the cleaning into the flowers. So a Cosmos in a designer bucket, this might go up at $1.40 a stem or $1.30 a stem in that bucket. It could be the same stem. So again, depending on which bucket the stem is in, its stem value is going to change. And it could be a bulk bucket where it's a whole bucket of Cosmos. And then the prices could be different there again. So it doesn't help you to say what's your bucket price, right? It depends a lot more on describing what exactly is in the bucket. And just to clarify, because people asked in our session, do-it-yourself bulk bridal buckets, yes, they're a bulk purchase, but they are a retail sale. They're not a business-to-business sale. Those prices are always going to be higher than any of the above buckets, or should be, because this is a business-to-business market. This is sales by designers. Right now, we don't have any of these marketplaces where brides are buying flowers. It could happen. It could be. I mean, I have my own online shop where brides are buying buckets, for example. But these marketplaces are not doing that at the moment. So I want to come back to this by the bunch and wholesale issue, because this, I think, is, I guess I'll say, the point of contention in these marketplaces. And it's very difficult. If you've sold at a farmer's market, you know that there are embedded tensions among sellers. And that happens when you're selling online too. So let me describe the most common tension. And I'm getting this from the gap analysis that we did, because in general, you could talk about two kinds of flower farms on a continuum. And of course, there's a range in between. But on one end, you have what I've called the side hustle farm. This is someone who is relatively new to farming on an acre or less, mostly self-labor. Small amount of their livelihood is coming from selling flowers. They're probably selling in multiple channels, this wholesale market, but they're probably selling retail. Maybe they do some of their own design work and so forth. And because they don't have hundreds of feet of row of any individual flower, they have diversity. They are selling by the bunch because they have 5 bunches of this and 6 bunches of that and 20 stems of this and so forth. Compare that to the other end of the scale. We have what I've called a livelihood farm. A farm like this has certainly over 2 acres of flowers, has been doing this for many years, 5 or more employees. They're focusing on this kind of a wholesale channel when they focus on the marketplace. Probably not just this one. They probably sell in several wholesale marketplaces, maybe an auction, maybe to a larger wholesaler or distributor, plus in these marketplaces. They make their money on volume. That's their business model. So here, this first farm is saying, we got to get our per stem price up because I sell by the bunch and I don't sell that many stems. The livelihood farm says, no, I want to get my volume up. I'm keeping my price what it is. And if I have to even lower it a bit to sell volume, that's what I've got to do. these are competing business models in the same marketplace. And I think over time, we'll see different ways of how we might reconcile for this, because I think there are buyers for each kind of flower. It's just we have to be very clear. And I want to just illustrate that by showing you an OFN shop, if I could briefly. Here. Some of you, if you don't sell in one of these marketplaces, you don't see these shops because generally they're for registered buyers only. So this is a quick example. It's not a real example. I just made this up. So let's take the Cosmos example. I got Cosmos on my brain here, don't I? So let's take the Cosmos example. There we go. I think you can see that. So on one hand, we have Farmer A, Garden Party Flower Farm, selling Cosmos by the bucket, $65 a bucket. And on the other hand, we have Farmer Demo Flower Farm 1, Farmer B, selling the same Cosmos, and they're selling by the bunch at $15 a bunch. Now, one of the things that I think we'll start seeing is if these farmers change this to a stem price, then the designer can easily compare. So if I entered that product as 50 stems instead of one bucket, you see how it calculates here, the $1.30 a stem. It does that automatically. And that's kind of a useful little tool. And if this farmer did the same, entered their one bunch as 10 stems, you can see it's a $1.50 stem. So the buyer doesn't have to do the math, it shows up. So this might be a strategy that we make it easier for buyers in these marketplaces to buy exactly the quantity they want. Let's look at another example. I'm looking at, this is to my point about foxgloves and the same thing for snapdragons. If we describe the product, so here, if the Garden Party Farm has said it's first cut, they're 70 centimeters tall, and they've said, I'm selling them by only 5 stems, and for $15. So that's $3 a stem. That's a pretty good price. These are some amazing foxgloves. They should be at a good price, no question. And if we look at the Dalmatian peach from this farmer, they have also described them, 40 centimeters and one bunch, $12. So this little line of description makes all the difference to the buyer because they know now what they're getting, and it pleases multiple buyers. Multiple buyers can find what they want. And lastly, I want to look at Lisianthus as an example. So here, Garden Party has described, 3 blooms per stem and at 40 centimeters. And again, if they went to the option of a per stem price, we would see it's $2.50 a stem. And the next farmer down here has a bunch at 8 stems at $1.88 a stem. So really quickly, a designer can look at this and they can understand the different product they're buying. And I think that's really key. And that's the point of showing this is it's pretty important in diverse marketplaces, and that's what these are, to describe the product you're buying to the buyer, because it's not like a face-to-face farmer's market where someone walks by and sees the thing. They've got to buy it without seeing it, and your communication to them is everything to help them buy it. So I think we're going to see these marketplaces use more and more of the descriptors over time. And OFN as a platform has a bunch of tools that we can use to do that. Okay, so I'd like to move on a little bit to just a few other things that came up in our discussion, mostly of which were questions. So how are prices discovered? When you sell at a farmer's market, economists will talk about this being the classic price discovery process, where buyers and sellers mingle and talk, and buyers look over at things and negotiate, and sellers look at each other's products and negotiate, whether verbally negotiate or you just go back to your stall and lower your price, whatever. But a price is discovered. And what is a good price? A good price is where a seller and a buyer are tickety-boo, where they're happy. And that happens. So right now, that's kind of what's happening mostly in these marketplaces. But questions come up. Do we want that to happen? Do we want to harmonize prices across different sizes and types of growers? In other words, do we want to set a floor price for products? And whether you're selling, in large quantities or whether you're selling in small quantities, that's the price per stem. It's a strategy that a market could use. It kind of relates to what other services the marketplace or the hub is offering the farmers. In some cases, hubs are really interested in being agents or the middle, negotiating with the buyers, because the farmers in those hubs, they join the hub because they don't want to sell direct. They don't want to be in constant communication with designers. But other hubs, they exist to facilitate constant communication between designers and suppliers. And I mean constant. Like when I sold in a hub on a picking day, my phone was going off constantly as I was negotiating to one of the buyers. Okay, there's the terracotta isn't really terracotta anymore. It's kind of gone to mustard yellow. Here's a picture. Do you still want it? Over and over and over again. So some hubs want that to happen. Others don't want that to happen. So it really kind of depends on the hub. And we have different kinds of hubs. So in Edmonton, for example, they're structured as a farmer-owned cooperative. The farmers who sell in that hub own the cooperative. In other words, they've invested the capital and they share the capital. So for them, they're in the interest of we all rise together. Other hubs run like a sole proprietorship, where one partner, and it could be the farmer or it could be a buyer, a designer, says, I'm going to offer this thing. I still believe in it. I'm going to offer this thing as a service to other farmers. But they charge to cover their cost, of course, for being the drop spot, for doing all the communication with the farmers, for setting up the shop every week, for carrying the risk of invoicing buyers who may not pay you back and chasing money. Believe me, because I do the plug sale, you wouldn't believe how much time it takes to chase payments from people. So those sole proprietorships are a completely different model. They're a service. Not a service that they're doing unilaterally. Of course, they're working with the other farmers to figure the thing out, but they're taking more risk than the other farmers. In a co-op, everyone's taking the same risk. And then we also have an informal group of producers who don't have any formal structure at all. And maybe they will, or maybe they won't, but right now they're kind of finding their way in setting up a collective marketplace. So these are really different models offering different services to growers and buyers, and that accounts for differences in prices too. This is a bit of a laugh that we had because someone asked, why are the prices the very same year after year for some flowers? And honestly, I think I laughed out loud actually, because it makes no sense. Of course, prices should not be the same year after year. And yet I can name for you some of my products where I haven't changed the prices in years. So this was a little kick in the button for me. Okay, think about that. If my input costs have changed, and from last year to this year, they changed 2-3%, absolutely. My flowers should just automatically go up by that amount, or else I'm walking backwards here in my business. I'm falling behind. And any business I sell to, because remember, we're talking about business to business sales here today. Any business I sell to, she totally gets this because she has done the same with her business. So there's no begrudging this. Cost of inflation and cost of living and the changing cost of inputs. And as we get into tariff situations, don't get me started, but this could become more and more of an issue. When cost of inputs goes up, your flowers need to go up. And you need to know that. So it's income tax time. You're all doing our income tax. Take a quick look back to last year and just do a little percentage calculation for yourself. How much did my inputs go up? And you know how to increase your prices this year. So what are some farmer strategies? Is these different marketplaces, and maybe they're not exactly what I want. What can I do? Well, of course, you want to try to find the kind of marketplace that works for your model. It's the same thing about looking for a farmer's market in face-to-face kind of world. Find the thing that works for you. That said, there aren't a lot to choose from yet. So you might be in a position of starting a new marketplace with other like-minded growers on the kind of model you want. You want to set floor prices, start a marketplace that does that. You want to sell to brides, start a marketplace that does that. So that's totally something you can do. If you can't get the price you need in a given marketplace and you don't want to start a new one, what are your options? Well, change up your product mix first. Sometimes there will be farmers in the same marketplace as you who are selling on a volume sale, and they will have certain flowers they're selling on a volume sale scale. Sorry, like Status comes to mind. Other things too, I just happened to come to mind. So if that price for Status is always going to be too low for you to make money, don't grow it. Or grow it and sell it elsewhere. Don't sell it in this marketplace. You don't have to sell all your flowers in one marketplace. Um, and that means you need to know your floor price. You need to know at what price am I losing money. And if you don't know that, you need to work that out, because it's a really important thing to know. The other thing is focus on being smart in relation to the dominant wholesale chains here. Focus on things that don't ship well, because that's the real value of local. Focus on things that aren't available, varieties not available. And if you say, well, gee, I don't know what those are, so walk into a few flower shops in your town or your city. Go there today. They're gearing up for Valentine's Day, so they'll have their coolers full, and see what's there. I guarantee you, you're going to see snapdragons. And I guarantee you, they're not going to be chantillies or butterflies. So that gives you a clue. If I grow snapdragons, I'm going to not grow the kinds they get through the mainstream distributors. And your designers will be thrilled with that. Lisianthus, I guarantee you they're going to have Lisianthus in there today. And they're going to have a white, a pink, and a purple. And they won't be frilly, and they won't be Roseannes, and they won't be celebs. So pick your varieties based on what's not available elsewhere. And the last thing that we talked about was staying close to buyers. When you sell directly, the advantage you have is you are talking to a buyer every single week when you drop stuff off. And you're always gleaning information about the market, right? Sometimes more information than you want, but that's gold. That's really, really amazing. In these marketplaces, you're relying a lot on the hub to do that, and the hubs do surveys, and all the hubs are trying to stay closer to buyers and get more information. Things are changing really fast, and so cultivating relationships with the customer is a critical thing to do. If you're selling direct to a designer or a flower shop now, you've got to have an annual meeting with them. You just have to, at least with your top buyers. I mean, I do this every year. I come away with so much. It completely changes my production schedule and plan every single year. So really important to do that. From this discussion about prices, we went on to talk about quality. Now, again, I want to say not because we think quality is a problem in these hubs. In fact, we know the opposite to be true, but because it's a good reminder to us. Quality starts with us. You can't blame anybody else for quality. Really, it's kind of down to us. Oh, sorry, I have a little goof. There we go. Sorry. Okay, so growers can maximize quality in several ways, and you probably already know this, but just to hit the high notes. Cleanliness, of course. Picking at the right stage, of course. If we're in a dry spell where you are, irrigating the night before is really useful in terms of helping pump up that flower to its fullness of moisture, which you really want. Another thing that came up that I hadn't thought much about before is ensuring a uniform bunch. So if you're selling a bunch of 10, they have to kind of be 10 of the same thing. So it can't be, that I have 2 great big tall first cut foxgloves and then 8 small third cut foxgloves. That is not a uniform bunch. That is not a quality bunch of flowers. They have to be more or less the same. You can't have 2 peonies that are totally blown open and 5 peonies that are completely closed. Designers expect uniformity, and so that is an element of quality for us. And mostly, honor your product description. If you said it was going to be something, don't bring something else. And change that description on your list or however you're selling the next year, so that, the next week even, if you said last week they were first cuts and now this week they're second cuts, well, it's pretty important to change that up, isn't it? Use the correct solution. Now, not everybody uses solutions, and we didn't actually have a discussion. None of the hubs require or don't require at the moment. It's kind of up to the producer. The point here is, if you've decided to use solutions, use the right one. Know the difference between a hydration and a holding solution, for example, because it does make a difference. Having made the mistake of using wrong ones, it's not good. And know that there are special solutions for special situations if you decide you're going to use those. And be aware that these solutions are for the farmer. They are not consumer solutions. Oh, look, I spelled solutions wrong. Sorry. They're not for the consumer stage. So that's, those little packets are a completely different thing. Putting those in your storage bucket, in your cooler, it's kind of a useless thing to do. So know your solutions. Okay, just to summarize, what I want to show you one more time is the Open Food Network page so that you know where to find resources and where to go in the future, because coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're having some other webinars. On Sunday this week, so February 16th, I'm not sure when you'll be seeing this. Maybe it's too late, you already missed it. But February 16th, a cross-country group of 5 farmers are going to talk about setting goals and what their goals are. So that might be useful to tune into, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be recorded and posted. And then in March, tentative date March 16th, but again, it will be on our calendar, is a session about the hubs. So not the prices and quality per se, but about how the hubs work, and some of the issues hubs face, and maybe a little bit more about how the Open Food Network works and so forth. Although if you're thinking of starting a hub, like by all means, you just contact me anytime and I can do a demo. You don't have to kind of wait for that. But I wanted to show you here the Open Food Network page, because when you go to this page, people have been saying, well, I don't see the flour page there. No, this is the trade page. So this is where if you're setting up a store or you're setting up a hub, you kind of do that from here. If you want to see the Open Flour Network page, go to About, where you see a list of all the projects that we're doing. And under projects, you see Open Flour Network, and you can go there. And that's the Open Flour Network page. Maybe one day we'll have a whole separate website for this, but honestly, okay, there are not enough of us. I know you think there's lots of flour farmers in Canada, and there are. There's not nearly enough of a critical mass to actually build a whole organization around this. So thanks to Open Food Network for hosting this at least. But if you scroll down, this is where you can see all the new resources. It's where you see the calendar of events. And if you go right to the bottom, you can stay informed and you can sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll be in the loop about that. Thank you so much for your attention. Apologize, I made a few little goofs there. And I hope you have a great rest of your winter as we start to look to spring coming. Thanks so much.